Well, last week we talked about kind of an uncomfortable night's sleep that led to a dream. But that dream, as all do, led to a dawn and the next day, and our traveler picking up his belongings and continuing on his way. He continued on through the wilderness until he finally knew he was nearing the place of his ancestors. He was nearing a place where he had relatives, and yet still plodding along. He had in his mind echoing this agreement that at least he had made with himself, if not with God, that he had promised that if God would protect him, God would prosper him, God would take care of him, God would keep his promises to him. Then he would make God his God. And that kind of echoed in the back of his mind as he walked up on a well and saw that there were several herds of sheep around this well. This area was not the best grazing land, but all the sheep were sitting around the well, and there was a huge rock over the top of it. And as he approached it, you can imagine the nerves. Will God keep his promise? Will God protect me? Who are these people? Are they going to be friendly to a stranger walking in? And as he walked up to them, he said, "Where are you guys from?" The answer was a comforting one. They said, "We're from Haran," from the town that he was heading towards. "We are from the area you're looking for." Isn't that an exciting thing to know that your journey is almost over? I remember when I ran my half marathon, they were telling the people that were along the sides of the road not to tell people that you're almost there. Do not cheer, you're almost there. Of course, that didn't stop people from doing it, 6 miles from the finish line. You're almost there. Really? Funny, I don't see the stadium. People do that in marathons too. The best of intentions. But when you see the stadium rise up in the distance as you come on, it gives you a little more energy. When you take the turn, and we finished on the football field at Kansas State, it was kind of cool, and you come around to the back side of it, you know you're almost there. You have a burst of energy and you start sprinting as you come into the stadium, as you finish. I remember my marathon, I turned the corner, and it was an eighth of a mile, but I'm there. That's this moment. That's this moment for Jacob as these guys say, "Yeah, that's where we're from." And, he says, "Do you know Laban? Do you know my uncle?" "Yeah, we know him. Matter of fact, that's his daughter coming with the sheep over there." And there's an interesting interchange here. Because Jacob looked at these guys, he looked at what they were doing, and this dweller in tents starts to show off something that's going to be a bit of a family, shall we say, characteristic. And it's actually a good one. You kind of have to look far and wide sometimes to find good characteristics for Jacob. But here you find one. He looks at these guys, he looks at their herds, and he goes, "It's pretty early in the day. You should probably still be grazing the sheep. Just water them and get them out of here. Why are they laying on the ground?" "Well, we wait until everybody's here. All the herds, then we remove the rock." The efficiency expert in Jacob is going absolutely insane right now. He's thinking this is not the way it ought to be. Then they point out this herd coming up and Laban's daughter bringing this herd. And he looks up and he sees this girl, and he not only thinks that she is the most beautiful girl he has ever seen, he looks at her and he realizes he's made it. He's alive. His brother hasn't killed him. He's made it. He removes the stone for her by himself so that she can water her sheep. Must have been quite a sight as he approached her, and she looks up, sees this complete stranger coming at her, and the next thing, he is weeping loudly, and he kisses her on both cheeks, and then he starts to tell her who he is. First moment. But once she hears who he is, she runs to tell her father. And he comes out, and he greets Jacob. Jacob has made safety. And now we see some of the formation that is going to go on with him. So turn, if you would, to Genesis. We will be in chapter 29. And we are going to start in verse 15. You'll notice that as the story progresses, Jacob has stayed with his uncle for about a month at this point. But not just as some honored guest in the home. Our dweller in tents is quite industrious, as a matter of fact, and has been working for his uncle. So when we look at verse 15, then Laban said to Jacob, "Should you work for me for nothing because you are my relative? Tell me what your wages should be." Remember God's promise, and throughout this whole passage, you're going to see a continuation of God keeps his promises. This is a theme in Jacob's life. It doesn't matter who Jacob is, what he does in a lot of ways. Now, there are consequences, but at the same time, God always keeps his promises. God always keeps his word. And here, the promise has been made that whoever blesses Jacob is going to be blessed. Whoever takes care of him is going to be blessed. Whoever he is associating with is going to be blessed. So what do you think has been happening for a month as he has been serving and living in Laban's household? I kind of call this sermon, a tale of two sisters, but it's really a lot about Laban and Jacob. And here you see Laban's mind starting to work. He is aware that he is being blessed by God because of Jacob's presence. And so, let's make a deal. He wants to keep him here. If you have a valuable employee, what do? You want to keep them on staff if they're making you money. So here's this conversation. This is not simply Laban being generous. If you know Laban, he's not that generous kind of guy. As you go through life, you run into a lot of Labans. And here he is. Tell me what your wages should be. Now Laban had two daughters. The older one was named Leah and the younger one Rachel. Leah's eyes were tender, but Rachel had a lovely figure and a beautiful appearance. Since Jacob had fallen in love with Rachel, who's the one that he first saw with the sheep, he said, "I'll serve you 7 years in exchange for your younger daughter, Rachel." Laban replied, "I'd rather give her to you than to another man. Stay with me." This is an amazing arrangement. Now, you'll notice that Jacob is using the layaway program here. He has no money. He has not come with a great deal of wealth. Now, Laban can see that, but he also sees that Jacob is a prosperous thing to have around. So, the deal is struck. I don't have wealth to pay you up front a bride price. At the time, two families getting married, the family of the groom himself, would show his wealth, the fact that he could take care of a family and that he would also benefit the family of the bride by paying a price for her. Certain cultures still practice this today. She's an exceptional woman, it's 2 cows. There you go. The deal is struck. Here it's 7 years. And this is Jacob's suggestion. This is quite a girl. Says that she's very attractive, that the older one had her own attractive ways, but Rachel's the one that Jacob is in love with. And so he strikes this deal for 7 years' service. Laban says, it's better for it to go to you than somebody else. You may not be rich, but yeah, I like this deal because it will make me rich. And so away they go. Here we are. Verse 20. So Jacob worked for 7 years to acquire Rachel, but they seemed like only a few days to him because his love for her was so great. Finally, Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife, for my time of service is up. I want to have marital relations with her. So Laban invited all the people of that place and prepared a feast. In the evening, he brought his daughter Leah to Jacob, and Jacob had relations with her. Laban gave his female servant Zilpah to his daughter Leah to be her servant. In the morning, Jacob discovered it was Leah. They had quite the wedding party. The wine flowed freely. And in comes the bride, veiled. And Laban pulls a switch. Laban has an excuse for this, but what's Laban's real reason? Same reason he said, let me pay you a wage. Generosity is always masked with something else. Have you ever met that person? Generosity is always masked with control. Generosity is always masked with something else going on. That's Laban. Laban has a plan. He presents his daughter. Jacob, in his celebratory stupor, does not even notice till morning. And this is a note. The greedy person will always prosper themselves at the expense of another. Not to get political, but one of the reasons that I have a problem with Marxism and with a lot of the current debate that we have politically is not that Marxism doesn't want to see equality. It's that every time you look at a Marxist government in history, it has arisen at the expense of another group of people. And that's the problem. A fascist government always has to start with blaming someone else for something as they come to power. The Nazis had to blame the Jews. The Bolsheviks had to blame the Tsar. Now, the Tsar was at fault for a lot of things in Russia when it went down. But nevertheless, what is it we do? We blame a group of people. Then they blame the capitalists. Then they blame the counter-revolutionaries. And then you have Stalin purging 6 million of his own people. What's the issue here? Greed, power, control. It always comes at the expense of somebody else. And you'll notice that Laban plays this game at the expense of his daughters and at the expense of Jacob. We wonder why later on in life Jacob is sometimes the way he is. Part of it is his training and who he's been trained under. His mother, you'll notice, had kind of a conniving bent. What did she do? She deceived her husband. She taught Jacob to do that, to deceive his father. She was going to help God out. Look at this situation. This is her brother, Laban. It's a family trait. There is a problem here. So here we are. In the morning, there is a problem. Jacob turns over and discovers something. In the morning, Jacob discovered it was Leah, so Jacob said to Laban, what in the world have you done to me? Didn't I work for you in exchange for Rachel? Why have you tricked me? Here comes the excuse. It's not our custom here, Laban replied, to give the younger daughter in marriage before the firstborn. Deal with it. He knows he's got him. Complete my older daughter's bridal week, then we will give you the younger one too in exchange for 7 more years of work. The greedy person always has a plan, too. You can find yourself in the position of either one of these people. Be careful that you not assume. Let us not assume we're not the greedy one. When we come into a situation, if we find ourselves plotting and planning, trying to help God out, trying to fix things up so that we benefit and we're benefiting at the expense of others, we need to be very wary. Here we continue. Jacob did as Laban said. When Jacob completed Leah's bridal week, Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife. And you already have a dysfunctional family relationship because the older daughter is unloved in a marriage. And there's going to be a problem from this. This is cascading down. God keeps his promises, but if we just get out of the way, boy, would it be kept in a much more easy way. But you can see right now the family tension is already building and starting. That's going to lead to Joseph being thrown in a pit by his brothers and being sold off. Here we are. Jacob did as Laban said. He receives Rachel as his wife. Verse 29, Laban gave his female servant Bilhah to his daughter Rachel to be her servant. Jacob had marital relations with Rachel as well. He loved Rachel more than Leah, so he worked for Laban for 7 more years. When the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, he enabled her to become pregnant, while Rachel remained childless. So Leah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Reuben, for she said, "The Lord has looked with pity on my oppressed condition. Surely my husband will love me now." Because what was valued in that place and time? Male children. The name Reuben, it's kind of an interesting thing. It basically means, look, a son. You know, it's kind of stating the obvious. Look, a son. Here he is. But you'll notice that the human tragedy that is a part of God using sinners to create something better is already unfolding. Jacob doesn't love Leah. Laban is defrauding Jacob. The soap opera is set. All we need is a few cameras, and we can just roll. You know, what was the old statement? As the sands through the hourglass, so are the days of our lives. Well, we're in the sand. We're out in the wilderness, and there are issues. There's something in here that is a question that can be asked. Why is Laban prospering when he's doing these things? And the answer is because God keeps his promises. Because it rains on the just and the unjust, as it were. In the passage where God speaks and says that he causes it to rain on the just, and he causes it to rain on the unjust, he's talking about the physical blessings of this life. And the physical blessings of this life are given to everybody, good, bad, and otherwise. Bad seems to prosper for a while, and it seems to be prospering here at Jacob's expense. Why is that? Why are we seeing God allow Laban to get away with this, so to speak? Because God uses sinful people in spite of ourselves. Because God keeps his promises. They depend upon him and him alone. God's plan is coming together. And Jacob is putting to use gifts that he never really had developed before. You think about this. If the birthright had been processed as God had predicted, if Isaac had listened to God's plan, if Isaac's wife hadn't schemed, if there hadn't been a whole plan to everybody working on their own angle, Jacob would have been developed as an administrator with his natural gifts, and he would have been developed as the leader of the family. But because no one is listening to God, Isaac is busy trying to do his own thing. Rebekah's busy trying to do her own thing and get her second son the position. Her second son's buying the birthright from the first because the first doesn't esteem it highly. And then he's angry about it. Jacob is driven to a different school. The school of working for Laban. The school of taking his administrative talents and putting them to use. Talents that you'll notice he passes on to his son. And his son ends up saving the entire family and much of the world. Because Joseph will inherit those same abilities. You know, the old VeggieTale has a joke at the beginning of, Joseph's rise to power. You know, little Joe there. They do it on a Western theme with the cucumber, as the hero. And what happens? They say, the mayor turns to his right-hand man and goes, who are we going to find to organize this thing? What's the state of your sock drawer? And the guy says something about it being pretty terrible. You wouldn't want me administrating Egypt. You wouldn't want my sock drawer. But Joseph will inherit that from his father. God is on the move. God is doing great things in a mundane, everyday thing. And he's using a greedy old man to do it. And he's using that greedy old man with a conniving younger man to do it. He's removed Jacob from his comforts. He's removed Jacob from his wealth. He's removed Jacob from his privilege in order to start teaching him a few things. Jacob will always have some issues, but he's being turned as he is so stubborn towards the Lord. God uses our circumstances. You'll notice when you see the greedy person, you might want to avoid doing business with them. But Jacob is trapped by his love for Rachel, and here we are. And now Leah is trapped in this thing. And this is happening at the human expense, but at the same time, God is working. And you'll notice that in the middle of human tragedy, God has mercy upon us. He sees that Leah is unloved, and he gives her a son, not Rachel. Not the favored one. Not the beautiful one. I can imagine this relationship was tense virtually their whole lives, and now it's just exacerbated by the marriage. When we get into Jacob's departure from Laban, we'll get even further into this rivalry that is building between these ladies. A rivalry that is not healthy, that is all about position and power. And you'll notice, you say, we look at it and it's baffling. Why does God allow Jacob, this stubborn man, in all these messed up relationships, to be his chosen one? And again, it comes back to the promises of God. Why is the world the way it is right now? Our sin, our issues, our selfishness. What is it that God is bringing to the table? His promises will not be stopped. His character will not be stopped. His plan will not be stopped. And he will use us in spite of ourselves to do great things. And that's the story with Jacob here. In this passage, we're dealing with, what looks like just kind of a messy family history. But you'll notice that every step of the way, God is involved. He hears the cries of the unloved wife. He hears the issues with the greedy uncle. What are the issues in your life that seem mundane to you that you think God is not involved in? Because let me tell you, it's not just the great big picture things. God is not just planning for the exodus from Egypt at this point. He's involved in the everyday moments of these people's lives. He knows Laban is a swindler. And maybe Jacob is learning a little bit too what it means to be on the other end of the chintzy deal. He has made this deal that if God prospers him, he will worship God. Well, he sees that God keeps his promises whether or not you do certain things or not. God will always keep his promise. The promise may be judgment, the promise may be deliverance, but God will always keep his promise. And here we are.